Ever since he came into our lives, he became one of the family. But now he's gone. With Fond Recollections memorial plaques and website, we can upload all our photos and videos of him. Visit fondrecollection.com today and cherish the happy memories of your loved ones.
Chapter 22, The Reckoning. 8 months had passed since Scotty Allen had been tased, beaten, and arrested with excessive force in full view of the entire St. Mark's Baptist Hospital's administrative staff. Not one of them had lifted a finger or raised their voice in protest, despite witnessing the horrific treatment Scotty had endured. Well, no one except Johnny Thomas. Everybody enjoyed Johnny's company, but nobody took him seriously. Homophobia still ran deep within a lot of conservatives at the hospital. Many tolerated his antics because they loved his food. To those individuals, Johnny was not someone noteworthy. They did not listen to or respect him. Still, Johnny was the only person to speak up against the appalling way Scotty Allen was being treated. In his cold, dank cell, Scotty would think about Johnny sometimes and would get emotional thinking about how he was the only one who stood up for him. The more he thought about it, the more similarities he could see between him and Johnny. They were both outsiders. Scotty was ostracized for daring to be successful and intelligent while black, and Johnny was ostracized because of his sexual orientation. Scotty could not help the fact that he was born black just as much as Johnny could not change his sexual orientation. Johnny would not pretend to date women just to make society feel comfortable. Scotty Allen had not given Johnny Thomas much attention before. He was ashamed to admit. In fact, he had not cared about him beyond his amazing food. He dismissed Johnny as the stereotypical flamboyant gay person with his yes girl and spilling tea. But now, he truly admired Johnny. He was a true man who stood up against the abuse he was witnessing, while all those so-called macho men were just standing on the sidelines, smirking. Scotty knew that Eric Rivera, Robert Samuels, and others at the hospital had plotted his downfall. Nicole Snipes warned him clear as day, and in his arrogance, he did not really pay heed to her warnings. Scotty should have listened to her and made plans to avoid this consequence. All he knew was that life as he knew it was over. Scotty had a respectable job, and he had worked hard to gain his high status. He rose above all odds so people would judge him for his abilities rather than just the color of his skin. Yet, in the end, the sad reality was, people could not look past their own prejudices long enough to see the person behind his skin tone. Scotty looked around the tiny cell he had been trapped in for the past 8 months. In America, the law says, innocent until proven guilty. But if you're black, you're always guilty before you prove yourself to be innocent. Scotty Allen was no longer naive. He knew the way of the world. Now, Scotty was trapped here, within gray cement walls with no windows, a heavily reinforced steel door with just a tiny rectangular window that showed the main cell block. His cell had a slot for pushing in trays of food and medication. Since Scotty was still waiting for his trial, he was not placed in the general population. This was because the institution did not know how to classify him amongst the other inmates. Was he a deranged murderer, or was he innocent? Nevertheless, Scotty had been kept in a solitary cell with one bed, which was more like a slim metal gurney with a lumpy mattress on top. He was provided with a threadbare blanket that did nothing to keep him warm. Also, there was a metal toilet and sink attached to the corner of the cell. The only time the guards let Scotty out of the cell was for chow. All of the inmates had to line up with their hands behind their backs as they filed into the chow hall in a straight line. The food was straight up dog food. In fact, Scotty was sure he had seen one of the jail's cooks unfreeze some slop that came out of a packet that read, "Not fit for human consumption." Scotty found it hard to eat for the first few days, but then the hunger kicked in, and soon he was scarfing down the terrible food like all the other inmates. The portion sizes were barely enough to satisfy a 5-year-old child instead of a grown-ass man. Scotty Allen was used to the routine by now. That is all you have in jail, is a routine. The inmates woke up when the facility turned on the harsh, fluorescent lights that made you dizzy at 5 a.m. Scotty used the inadequate restroom, and if he were lucky, the guards would escort him to the shower so that he could wash up. As a former medical professional, Scotty had never seen a shower room that was so disgusting. The inmates that cleaned the shower used the same disgusting mop over and over throughout all the units. The shower room floor was a hotbed for diseases, and if you dared to step into the shower barefoot, the best case scenario was that you ended up with athlete's foot or some sort of foot fungus. At worst case, if diabetic, you could catch gangrene and your foot would rot off over time. Scotty was not issued shower shoes, so he got creative, putting plastic bags or empty potato chip bags which he bought from the commissary. Scotty was eventually allowed to mingle with the jail general population for 1 hour in the recreation yard. Some inmates during this time worked out. Some used this opportunity to cook up inventive recipes. At the very least, their methods made the food taste better than the slop they were forced to choke down in the chow hall. Some inmates played basketball, while others played poker and other games for cigarettes and packs of ramen noodles. It was a strange ecosystem. It was held together by an exceptionally fine thread. Anyone who took a step out of line, that thread could snap, and all hell would break loose. There was a noticeably clear racial divide in jail, where the whites only spent time together with other white people. The black guys would all stick together, and so would the Hispanics. Talking to a member of the other race was allowed but frowned upon, and too much fraternization could lead to a suspicion of espionage. That was the quickest way to get assaulted or killed. Luckily, since Scotty had not been sentenced yet, he was not subjected to jail yard politics. Scotty planned to keep his head down and work on his case with his lawyer until his court date. Whenever he thought about his initial hearing, Scotty was left with a bitter taste in his mouth. The judge had not even bothered listening to his side of the story, even though he had hired an expensive attorney to represent him. The judge never even gave Scotty the chance to plead his case. Scotty's attorney laid out all his accomplishments in front of the judge, but the judge had decided to overlook all of them. The judge had refused Scotty's appeal for bail, claiming that he was a danger to society, so he should not be allowed the freedom to walk the streets. Since his bail was denied, Scotty had lost whatever little hope he had for the judicial system. This system was not designed for people like him. People like Scotty tended to get longer jail sentences for the same crimes that a criminal of another race might commit. People like him were judged guilty with just a look, because of the color of their skin. Scotty knew about the racial disparity in America, but genuinely believed that a good education alongside spotless conduct would keep him safe. Scotty thought by accomplishing these things he would be perceived as a distinguished, upstanding member of the community. His idealistic approach was crushed when he had his time in court. Scotty had gotten an unpleasant reality check that you cannot escape the perceived notions that society had placed upon him. Scotty Allen grew hard and cold after his arrest. He now knew that the only person in the world that was worth trusting was himself. He was on his own, and only he can get himself out of this situation. He realized that in this country, it did not matter how educated, well-accomplished, successful, or wealthy he was. Segregation and slavery ended long ago, but there were still a lot of people who felt that it was us versus them. Scotty and other black people being them. Jim Crow laws might have been abolished, but a lot of people would be happy to see them reinforced. Scotty could see it firsthand, because without any solid evidence of wrongdoing on his part, the judicial system had denied him bail and labeled him as a murderer, based solely on hearsay and the testimonies of a few jealous and racist staff members who hated him for daring to rise above his station. Guilty until proven innocent. These words kept ringing in Scotty's head like a warning and a promise. That was the exact opposite of what he was taught growing up. Jail taught Scotty a lot. It was an education, different from the academic education he received from his Ivy League school, however, equally valuable. He learned he needed to watch his back, that everyone was an enemy, even those who were his friends. The guy you chat with in the chow hall is your enemy, even though he shares his food with you sometimes. The guy who once loaned you a packet of ramen is your enemy, even though he did it because he knew you were hungry. He learned to never answer questions like, "So what are you in for?" and "What landed you up in here?" Because inmates will sell you out just to get some time reduced from their own sentences. Being in jail was like being on a new planet with a specific set of rules, and Scotty had to learn them all. However, he was quick to study. Scotty knew that he was trapped with no allies around him. Several corrections officers and inmates hated him on sight. They called him names like baby killer and threatened to smother him in his sleep like he smothered the babies. They did not know how the babies died. They were enraged all the same. Having the reputation of being a black baby killer was not the best combination to be in jail. Scotty knew he had to watch out for hidden shivs or broken glass and a bunch of other things. Most inmates were brutally smart, and they knew how to hurt you in a million ways. Scotty knew he had to retain his sanity until his court date, which was still a few months away. He did the only thing he could, confined to his cell in tight quarters. He worked out religiously in his one-man cell. He practiced Tai Chi to focus his strength in his mind, to strengthen his core and his body. He meditated. He recited passages he learned back in college just to keep his mind sharp. Scotty could not afford to lose himself. His mind was all he had. His strength was all he had left, and he needed every ounce of it. Scotty was a man of intellect, without a single trace of criminality in his DNA. His cell was cold and cramped. There was hardly any room to walk around, but he made do. He stayed inside his cell for as long as he could bear it, because being with the general population made him a walking target for would-be vigilantes looking to punish baby killers. His cell had only one advantage. It was right in front of the rec hall, and he could see the TV clearly from the rectangular window pane. He peered out to see what was playing today and noticed that the local news was left on by one of the inmates. It had been 8 months since his arrest, and the media had cooled down on his case because people needed some new gruesome crime to be entertained. Scotty just shrugged and continued doing push-ups when he heard something on the news that nearly made him lose his grip and fall on his face. Hastily pushing himself up to his feet, he leaned closer to the door of his cell to hear the TV more clearly. The news broadcaster was standing in front of St. Mark's Baptist Hospital, the entire building in full view. The broadcaster was saying,
"Shocking news at St. Mark's Baptist Hospital, an unlucky place that simply cannot escape tragedy. People are now calling it St. Murder Hospital because of all of the astonishing high number of deaths that have happened in the trauma units. Our preliminary reports indicate that foul play was involved. We will keep you updated with this story as we receive further information from the police in the coroner's office."
Scotty Allen could not believe his eyes. This report vindicated him. He had told anyone and everyone who would listen that he was innocent, and now this report proved it for them. He felt his hands shaking with joy. Scotty felt a twinge of sadness for the patients who had died, but he was elated that his jail time would inevitably end soon. Scotty wanted to dance. He wanted to yell and jump for joy and kiss someone. He wanted to celebrate. He knew he had to keep his composure. One wrong move in this place, and it could be added months into his sentence, which was ludicrous for Scotty because he had not even gotten sentenced yet. But Scotty did not put it beyond this jail staff to keep him there longer on some ridiculous pretense. Scotty needed to continue acting like nothing was different, to keep to himself, and avoid any confrontation with jail staff and inmates. Scotty Allen felt like he could breathe after a long time. He lay back on his lumpy mattress on his cold metal bed and took a deep breath. His mind was swimming with all the incidents that occurred in the various critical care units at the hospital. He had done this for months now, replaying the incidents over and over in his brain, hoping he would find some new snippet of information or any little clue that would help him prove his innocence. However, he would always produce the same thing. Today, as he lay down to contemplate each incident in his head, Scotty could swear he could hear someone whistling in his head. St. Mark's Baptist Hospital was chaotic. Some of the senior volunteer staff had gathered in the main lobby. Their duties for the day were being handed out. The ladies were asked to greet the visitors and guide them to their desired locations. With the senior volunteers in one spot, it was an excellent place to trade gossip. That was the highlight of some of their days. They would talk about which doctor they saw with his hand up some nurse's skirt, or which orderly was skimming meds for herself off the pharmaceutical tray. Everyday gossip that some volunteers loved to indulge in. It was one of their few vices, and they enjoyed it thoroughly. Joyce Duncan, a regular senior volunteer in her mid-70s, was the first one to speak up that day.
"I'm going to quit volunteering at this hospital. It has too many unexplained deaths for me to cope with,"
she said, wagging a tall brown finger at her fellow volunteers. Marilyn Smith, another volunteer, laughed at Joyce's words.
"Joyce, you know you're not going anywhere."
She chuckled.
"You love it here. That is why you have stayed all these years. Plus, I know you live for gossip. You are just as bad as Johnny from the kitchen. You feel like you are living out your very own hospital soap opera. Only this time it's better because it is real life. You are part of it."
Marilyn clapped her hands mirthfully.
"This place has non-stop action. Better than any game show or soap. And the action lately has been juicy,"
she says, fanning herself. Joyce smiled, but still looked uncertain.
"You are right, of course. I love working here, Marilyn. But the deaths of those NICU babies were terrible. Oh, I could not bear it. It still gives me nightmares."
As Joyce and Marilyn were talking, a quiet voice spoke up from the corner. They had not noticed her there before.
"Yes, what happened to the newborn babies was bad,"
Tracy Kite said quietly. Marilyn and Joyce looked surprised. They had not noticed Tracy was standing right there.
"Tracy, where did you come from? You startled us,"
Joyce exclaimed.
"Did I?"
Tracy said vaguely, a distant expression on her face.
Think about it this way, though. At least those babies are not suffering anymore. Think about all the torture they would have endured with the doctors prodding and poking them with needles and intubating their little lungs and all those painful procedures. All those babies were premature. they did not even belong on Earth. It was not their time to be born, not just yet anyway.
Joyce and Marilyn looked at each other slowly. They felt an uneasy feeling in the pit of their stomachs when they heard Tracy speak. Her voice sounded different as well. She did not sound like herself. Her regular voice was high-pitched, but this time she was talking in a slow, deep voice. Marilyn squeezed Joyce's hand. They were not sure why they were afraid, but they felt a sudden chill run down their spines. Marilyn finally found her voice after a long pause.
You're right.
She smirked.
But what about the kids that died in the trauma ICU? Or the burn victim that died in the burns unit?
Marilyn put her hand on her hip and cocked her eyebrows. She wanted an answer from Tracy. What she did not expect was how Tracy answered. Tracy's eyes flashed with anger, and she looked furious. She blocked Marilyn and Joyce with her body, looking at them dead in their eyes. Her face seemed devoid of any warmth that people usually associated with Tracy Kites. It seemed like she had taken off a mask and was finally revealing her true face to others. And it was a terrifying, remarkable sight indeed.
Look, I'm sorry they all died, okay?
Tracy said defiantly. Marilyn trembled.
Why are you sorry, Tracy?
She whispered fearfully.
Use your stupid brain, Marilyn.
Tracy mocked.
Do you think any of those poor patients wanted to live as cripples after enduring such terrible injuries? They would never be able to live normal lives again. 2 of the kids were brain dead in the trauma ICU, and 90% of the burn victims' bodies were covered in 3rd-degree burns. He would look like a monster if he survived. Do you think he wanted to live the rest of his life looking like a scary, maimed monster from a scary movie?
Tracy asked furiously.
I mean, just really fucking think for a second. Close your gaping mouth. You look like a cow. Think for a fucking second before you start talking, you dummy. Shit.
Tracy said venomously. Marilyn and Joyce could see the anger radiating off Tracy, but they still could not understand why. Her words were weird, but they took it as small talk. Just a little gossip to pass the time. There was no skin off their backs, an old lady having a tantrum. Tracy, however, was fuming as she headed away from the ladies and headed towards the exit. She turned around and looked at Marilyn and Joyce with a dangerous look in her eyes. She slowly and deliberately took off her volunteer vest and badge and tossed both items in the lobby trash can in full view of the senior volunteers. The volunteers looked shocked because they had never seen the side of sweet old Tracy Kites. Tracy Kites walked down the main entrance ramp and pulled her car keys out of her pocket. She got into her car, an old gray sedan, and turned on the ignition. The engine hummed as it started. Tracy put her favorite song on the radio as she pulled out her Best Volunteer Award from her bag and threw it out of the car window onto the pavement. She revved the engine of the car and drove off whistling her favorite song. Meanwhile, Scotty Allen kept waiting for the tides to turn now that another murder had occurred at the hospital. He thought it surely meant that he would get exonerated eventually. He called his lawyer excitedly about the news, but his lawyer informed him that the new developments made no difference. The crime was blamed on a copycat killer, and Scotty was still the prime suspect in the case. Scotty slowly hung up the call. All the elation he had felt once he heard the news had dissipated like a balloon deflating in the wind. He walked back to his cell and dragged his bedsheet off his lumpy mattress. People often forget that medical professionals know how to save lives. They also know how to end them. Scotty thought about spending his life in this shithole, and his mind was made up. He would leave one way or another. He would leave on his own terms. He constructed a noose from the bedsheet and tied it to the top bar of his cell door. He knew exactly which artery to pressurize so that the oxygen supply to his brain would be cut off as quickly and efficiently as possible. As he started to lose consciousness, his life did not flash before his eyes. All he heard was that haunting whistle echoing through the halls of St. Mark's Baptist Hospital. The end.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you had fun or picked up anything from this episode, please assist us by hitting the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. You can also comment and share our content. These small things really help our channel and mean a lot to us. Also, special thanks to our Patreon supporters. You guys are the heartbeat of this channel, and we can't thank you enough for being so generous. If you would like to join our Patreon community, please click on the link below. You can contribute as little as $5 per month. You can get all kinds of perks. You can even buy merchandise of your favorite characters at our shop store. Click on the link provided below. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, Remember, you are cherished by us. So be kind and know that we consider you as family.